Okay. Good morning, everybody. We're here on Daf Nun Bet, Amud Bet, 52b, masechet Shabbat. 6 lines on the top, last word on the line, V'ha'ika. Well, 2 words before that, V'tovlan b'mkoman. The Mishnah taught us how wherever they're sitting there, wherever they are, the collar around the horse or other animals that normally have these collars, just put them into the mikveh after they get the sprinkled from the parah aduma. So the Gemara's problem is like this: V'ha'ika chatzitza. There's a interpose between. Why? Because the way that they had the collars was, Rashi says, there was a ring that was placed into a hole in the collar. In the collar, there was a small hole. They had a small ring that went in, and through that ring is where they placed the leash that was attached to the collar. Now, since that ring through the hole is a very, very tight fit, so the water can't get in. So there's a chatzitza, there's an interpose. So how could you say that you could just be tovel, no problem, without loosening anything, if it's going to be a chatzitza and it's not going to get through. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Moshe, we're talking about, you're right, we're talking about that he hit it with a hammer until the hole actually widened. And now there's no chatzitza, and that's what we have to be speaking about. That's what Rabbi says. Okay? So the Gemara says, let us say that Rabbi Ami Rav Yosef Sirle is he holds like Rabbi Yosef. The ikra bitzak nafcha the ame bevoyin minoy the adam lenoy behema kiva the ritchon ava behu maisa uparcha latuma minayu. What's the Gemara's kasha? We said yesterday, how can the collar of an animal, which is a keli that serves an animal, be mekabel tuma if kelim that are mekabel that serve animals are not mekabel tumat met? Only things that serve humans. So the Gemara had 2 answers yesterday. One was Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha answered that we're talking about minoy adam lenoy behema, which means that once it was already designated for human usage, it already has the ability to be mekabel tumah. And if it's mekabel tumah, then even though I changed the designation and I decide that I want it to be designated for an animal, the tumah won't come off. That was the first answer of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. But Rav Yosef says, no, even the regular collar that was never made first for a person is mekabel tumah. Why? So Rav Yosef said, because since in order to pull the animal many times you put your hand in and use it, so it also serves the human. Even though it's made for the animal, but it's made for the human to be able to do what he wants with the animal, and therefore that's enough to make it mekabel tumah. Those were the 2 opinions of how it's possible to say that this collar is mekabel tumah. So Gemara wants to say like this. Rabbi Ami just said, Rabbi Ami just said that how is this little hole that's tightly fit, that the ring that tightly fit through the hole, going to be able to have a tvilah if there's a chatzitza, the water won't get through. So he said, because you banged it out and you made it wider. So the Gemara is saying like this, let us suggest that has to be like Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef was the man that said that as long as you're mekabel as long as there's some usage for a human, it's a mekabel tumah. Okay? Why? So he says, because if you hold like a yitzhak nafcha, that says that what? Then really, they're not mekabel tumah. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says, really they're not mekabel tumah. According to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, stam shiara behema not mekabel tumah. And the only reason why they're mekabel tumah in our Mishnah is b'va'im minoi adam l'no behema. So the only reason why they became tamei is because they were first made for man, and now they were changed for behema. So the problem is kivan deritchan avad b'umaisa. So therefore, so what happened over here? I did an action now to widen them. Once you widen that hole and you bang it out, and it's uneven because of the hammer, it doesn't look nice for a man at all, right? A person can't use them, even though they were initially used. But since Rabbi Ami was forced to say, that's what he said the answer is, the only reason why the water will get through is because you banged it out. So now it's not usable for man anymore. It's only for an animal. Now, and I did an action to change it from human function to animals. And the problem is that if you do an action, a real masechet in the item, the tumah comes off right away. Why? How do you know that? Uparchal tumah minayu. The Tanam, kol hakelim yordin l'dei tumasam machshava. All the kelim that the owner thinks that he wants to use them the way they are now, without doing any additional work. Let's say you have leather, right? And you want to make strips, like little strips of leather to tie things, whatever it is. And in the middle, you're about to cut them, and you say, you know what? No, I like it. It's a nice piece of leather. I think this fits my table. It's ready. It's for a tablecloth. So the yordin l'dei tumasam machshava. Just my thought brings them down to tumah, which means they're able to be mekabel tumah now because they are completed. One of the conditions, one of the main conditions, is that the keli, it has to be a keli to mekabel tumah, and it has to be completed. So what makes it completed? My thought. My thought that I want it to be done completes it. Okay. The eino limitu matan el b'shinu ma'aseh. And they don't come up from the tumah. Once they become susceptible for tumah, okay, then they will always be susceptible to tumah until he decides to actually change them, and he begins to change them. He begins to do an act to change them. He needs to do a shinui ma'aseh. He has to change it with an act. Okay? So the problem is like this. So if you hold like Rav Yosef, what does Rav Yosef say? That a regular collar serves a human. Okay? The reason why it's tamei, what is the reason, according to Rav Yosef, that the collar in the Mishnah is susceptible to tumah? Because it serves man. How does it serve man? Because I can use the collar to pull the animal. So whether I bang out a hole wider, I widen the hole, I don't widen the hole, it's always still serves man. And therefore it's always going to be mekabel tumah, even though I banged it and it's ugly. Because the underlying reason of why it was susceptible had nothing to do with the fact that it was a nice ornament that was made originally for a man. Rabbi Yosef says it wasn't made for a man. You don't have to say that in this Mishnah. It could have been made for the horse, but it serves man. So it's fine. So therefore, Rabbi Ami says the only way to get the water in As if you bang it out and you make a hole, fine. And when you bang that hole, it's still tameh until you put it into the mikveh. And now the water will get through, so everything's great. But if you learn that the only reason why this item was susceptible for tumah was because it was once made for man. It was made for man, not to serve man. It was actually an ornament for man. And now he designated it for an animal, and that doesn't change the status. Its susceptibility for tumah. Okay, that's if you didn't do an action. But once I did an action that changes the item, it clearly cannot be used for man anymore because it becomes pretty ugly. Once you widen the hole, then what do you need to go to a mikveh for? Now that you're widening the hole to get the water through, you don't need the water anymore, Frekta Gemara. Because now all it is a changed item that serves only, according to Bitzak Nafcha, animals. And that's not Mekabel Tumah. And how do I know? Because I did an action that changed it to that. So what do you have to go to the mikveh for at all? So it must be that he holds like Rabbi Yosef. So the Gemara says, no, Savar like Rabbi Yehuda, da'ama ma'aseh l'taken lav ma'asehu. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda. You want to know why the banging doesn't take away the tumah? Because the banging fixes it. The rituch, the hammering of the hole actually fixes it. That's lav ma'asehu. That is not an action that can nullify the vessel from being in the category of a vessel. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Lo Omer Shini Ma'aseh L'Taken Ela L'Kalkel. Rabbi Yehuda says, only for kilkul do we say that it changes. Only if you do an act that actually ruins it. But if you're doing something for its better, therefore, it's not going to remove the susceptibility for tumah. And therefore, this act was not enough to remove its tumah, or its susceptibility for tumah, and therefore it still needs a mikveh if you want it, if it became tameh. Okay. B'matnita tani. In the Braita, they taught a different answer. Not that you hammered it, but it's talking about they were very holy. Holy means there were wide holes. There was a nice space between the ring that was placed inside the collar, and therefore the water was clearly able to get through, and there was absolutely no issue. Okay? Now, even though that's not the normal way of making these collars, and that's why the Gemara didn't want to say that teretz. The Gemara wanted to, Rabbi Ami tried to say you hammered it. You had to widen it in order for it to go to the mikveh. Why didn't the Gemara just say it's talking about wide holes? Because that wasn't the norm. But the Braita does say that. That's the case. Okay. Shal Talmid Echad Migalil Al Yonah to Rabbi Eliezer. There was a Talmid from the upper Galil that asked Rabbi Eliezer, Shamati, I heard, Shecholkin bein tabat letabat. There's a difference between different types of rings. And I'm wondering what that difference is. Amalo shemalo shamata el linyan Shabbat. You probably only heard, perhaps you only heard this in regards to Hilchot Shabbat, that there's a difference between different rings for the halachot of carrying. We're going to see later on, a ring that has a seal is a problem, a ring that doesn't have a seal is not an isur. So, therefore, might be an isur d'Rabbana, but not an isur d'Oraita. So therefore, that's probably what you heard, the difference between the rings. But the ilinyan tumah da v'da chadahi, because in regards to tumah da this v'da and this chadahi, it's all the same. There's no difference in ilchot tumah between different types of rings. So the Gemara says, "Ul inyan tumah da v'da achati, ve'atnan tabat adam tmeya, Tabat behema kelim shakol tabot torot. Like we learned yesterday, the ring of a human is able to be mekabel tumah because it serves man. But the ring of an animal, the ring of different vessels, or all sorts of other rings that don't serve man primarily, torot, they're tahor. So how could you say that there's no difference between rings in regards to hilchot tumah? So the Gemara says, Kika amale ihu nami de adam kamale. When Rabbi Eliezer said there's no difference between rings, he meant in the rings that are made for man, the only difference is with hilchot Shabbat, whether it has a seal or not. But in tumah, there's no difference. Your ring, my ring, tumah, it's tameh. Uda adam da achasi. The Gemara says, and even for human, is there only one type of ring? They're all mekabel tumah. V'atanya tabat shekina lachor b'matnav u'lekasha b'ben ktefav. A ring that was made to tie to the belt, the ring. Exactly. Like some sort of buckle, or the kasha b'ben ktefav, or to tie it between his shoulders. Exactly what that was for is a different opinions in the Mefarshim here. They would Rashi learns here it's Bates re'osav b'ratzayra. Seems like the sleeves of the item of the clothing, they would tie up the sleeves to stay up with this ring. Anyways, they didn't serve the man; they served the clothing. Tahora, so it's tahor. The only one that is a tachshit for a man, that is the one that's mekabel tumah. So you see here that even the ones that man uses for himself, there are different types. One is for his clothing, but it's all for him. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer is saying there's no difference in hilchot tumah for rings on the hand. On the finger, for tumah, there's no difference. For Shabbat, the ones on the finger, there's a difference, whether they have a seal or they don't have a seal. But the ones on the finger, for finger usages, okay. The Gemara says, with the etzva david achasi, but not about shel matras v'chotma shel amog tmeah. The Mishnah in Kalim says a ring that's made out of metal. So metal doesn't need to have a beit kibul to be mekabel tumah. As long as it's a keli, it's mekabel tumah. It doesn't have to be a receptacle. It doesn't have to be able to hold something. And the hole inside a ring that has like the chotama, that has the seal made out of almog, which is coral. That's not something that's mekabel, because it's made to be stuffed with whatever seal you have in there. So a ring is only mekabel tumah if it's made out of metal. However, if it's made out of hishel almog, if it's made out of almog, which is like the coral reefs, so that's not really metal. That's only mekabel tumah if it has a base kibul. It doesn't have a base kibul. So even if its seal is made out of metal, since the actual keli is not made out of metal and it doesn't have a beit kibul, it's not a receptacle to hold things, it's going to be tahorah. So you see that there's one ring on the finger that's mekabel tumah and one ring that isn't. So the Gemara answers, Ki kamale iu nami kula shel matras kamale. He was talking about metal ring fingers. There is no difference. Right? For man, on the finger, metal, the only difference is for Shabbat, if it has a seal or not, but not for tumah. The Od Sha'al, this Talmud asked Rabbi Eliezer another question. Shomati shecholki memachat lemachat. I heard there's a difference between needle and needle. Okay, I don't know what the difference is. Amalei shemalo shomata Elo inyan Shabbat. In regards to Shabbat, there is differences whether it has a hole. So if it has a hole, right? If a needle has a hole, that means it's made for sewing. If a person carries that on Shabbat, he's chayav chatat. Because what are you walking around with that? You're carrying. In Rishut Rabim. If it doesn't have a hole, so what's it made for? It's an ornament. It's like a pin, a needle, whatever it is. Oh, so that, even if maybe it's asur, but it's for sure not going to be chayav chatat. So that's where there will be a difference between different needles. But the ilinyan tumah dovid do achasi. But because in regards to tumah, he said to him, they're exactly the same. There's no difference. So the Gemara says, well, the inyan tumah dovid do achasi vatnan machat shenital chora or uktzah. A needle that its hole was taken away, which means it broke. The hole that you put the thread through broke. O uktzah teora. Or its end, its sharp point. Because what happened to the item was something that now affects its usage. Can't be used for its melacha. So therefore it's not a keli anymore. It was only mekabel tumah because it was a keli, it was a vessel that had a function. Now its function ceases to exist. Therefore it's now tahor. So you see that there's a difference between needles, even for the halachot of tumah, broken ones and not broken ones. So the Gemara says, Kika amalei b'shlema. He meant in whole, healthy needles, there's no difference in regards to tumah. So the Gemara says, b'shlema dovid do achasi. Even in complete ones, there's a great difference. V'tanan machat shel techaludai me'akev et hatfira torah. V'im lav tmeah. A needle that grew some rust. So if the rust, is ma'akev, thank you. The tefira, the sewing, it's Torah. Because now it can't be used. But v'im lav tmeah. But if it doesn't, it's tmeah. The amri devei Rabbi Yanai, v'hu shirishuma nikr. Okay? And Rabbi Yanai says that's only when you're able to see its imprint. You're able to see it clearly. Now, what is Rabbi Ami going on? Is he going on the first part or the second part of the Braita? So Rashi has two pshatim. The first pshat in Rashi is that it means that when the Braita said that if it doesn't interrupt the sewing, it doesn't ruin the sewing, the effect of the sewing, it can be tamei. So it says v'hu sharishum nikr. That's only if you're still able to see the rishuma of the machat. You're still able to see somewhat of the needle left over. It's not so covered by the rust. Which means even if it's able to be used, but if it's completely covered by the rust, for some reason, we don't view it as a needle that's mekabel tumah anymore. Not sure why, but that would be the first pshat in Rashi. The second pshat in Rashi is that it's going on the first part of the Braita, which the Braita that said that if it actually disrupts the function of sewing, it's going to be tohara. So to that, Rabbi Yanai said, that's only if the rust will make an imprint on the clothing. How much rust disrupts the usage of this, the functionality of this needle is when you're able to see the rust end up on the clothing. That is the problem. But whatever it is, we see clearly that there is a difference between wholesome, healthy, not broken, at least. I mean, they have rust, but two different types of needles, even for the regards to Hilchot Tumah. Rust, very rusty, or not so rusty. He's talking about a smooth one that is clean from any rust. So in complete, healthy, and smooth needles, there's no difference in regards to Ilchot Tumah. Says the Gemara. The Gemara says, and even in the smooth ones, are they the same? A needle in Reshut HaYachid may be moved. The talta doesn't mean to carry over here, may be moved. It's not muktzah. Whether it has a hole and whether it doesn't, since it has a function that you're able to take out a splinter, it's not muktzah. And the only time there's a difference of whether it has a hole or not is only el le'inyan tum bilvat. The Braita says for tumah there's going to be a difference. Meaning, if it has a hole, it's mekabel tumah. If it doesn't have a hole, it's not mekabel tumah. Now, you have to know why the Gemara is going to answer that's not true. What the Gemara thought in the Havamim of here, of why it should make a difference, needs some explanation. But the Gemara answers, so what was the Gemara's question? The Gemara's question is, you see that even in a clean, non-broken needle, there's a difference whether it has a hole or it doesn't, even for the regards to Tumah. So the Gemara says, Atigam Abai leave the Rav Begolmi. Abaya interpreted according to Rava Begolmi, which means the Torah says that you need to have, the Torah says, Kli Ma'aseh. In order for a keli to be mekabel tumah, it has to be completed. So golmi means raw, not yet finished product. And therefore, let's say you have a needle that you want to complete and make a hole on the top. So you can put a thread through, but you didn't yet. So since they're standing ready to have a hole and they don't have their hole yet, they're not called kli ma'aseh, a complete keli, and they're not mekabel tumah. Okay? However, Rabbi Eliezer was talking about needles that are completed. So on those needles, there is no difference in regards to tumah if they are healthy, clean, shiny needles. There's no difference between any needle once they have whether they have the hole or they don't have the hole, because as long as they're finished products, whatever they're made for, there's no difference. And the only difference will be Hilchot Shabbat. Okay, says the Mishnah Kedosha, the new Mishnah, of more animals and more things that can be carried on Shabbat and cannot be carried on Shabbat. Chamor yotzei madat. Madat was a blanket that they would place, and it would cover its back and its chest, and it was placed underneath the saddle. The saddle was a smaller item, and we'll soon see that the saddle also, now the madat, this blanket was to give it warmth, as we'll see soon later that the donkey is a very cold animal, and they would place it there for warmth, and they would place the saddle on the madat. Bizman shikshurabo. As long as it's tied to it. Now we'll soon see what that's about in the Gemara. Zecharim, if you have male sheep, okay, like rams, yotzin livuvin, they will go out livuvin. The Gemara is going to tell us what that means. Rechelot, ewes, I think that's what the word is. Ewes are female sheep. Yotzot shchuzot kvulot. We'll also see in the Gemara what that means. Ukvunot, and also they can go out wrapped in some sort of cloth that protected their wool. Now, because that was normal for them. We'll soon see. Ha'izin yotzot tzururot. All these things will be explained. The goats can go out with tied udders. Okay? Now, the reason why they tied their udders was one of the two reasons. Either because they were trying to tie the udder tight so it should stop giving milk. Once it stops giving milk, it's able to get fat, or it's able to have more children, and therefore, that's what they wanted. They wanted to fatten it, or they wanted to have more children. So they would tie up their udders so it should stop its milk flow. That's one reason. The other reason is, she's asking kashas. The other reason is that to catch any potential milk that fell out of it. All these, according to the Tana Kama, are considered a malbush for the behema and not a masri. They're all considered like a clothing of the animal. Even the things that you tied around the udders of the goats. Why is that? Because any shmira that I'm trying to protect something from an animal is already considered a malbush and not a masri. Another reason is because a person, the needs of a person is what establishes what is considered a malbush for his animal. Okay? So, I want you to wear this. I think you should wear this. Well, I don't need it. Well, I don't need it. Yeah, but whatever I need is what you need. I'm your owner. The man decides, I want my thing to wear these things, so it becomes the norm, and it's the malbush, and therefore it's not carrying. Rabbi Yossi says, nothing doing. Why? Because all these things are considered a masri. And that's not the normal watching of an animal. And therefore you can't consider these a tachshit, an ornament, or a malbush, and he doesn't go for it. Besides the last case of the female sheep, when you're trying to protect its wool, that's already a tachshit, and that's not a masri. Because that was done normally. According to Rabbi Yossi, it has to be a very, very common act. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, izim yotzot tzurot liyabesh avaloch lechalev. Rabbi Yehuda differentiates by the goat whether you're tying it around the udder to shrivel up the udder and not have any more milk. He says that's okay, but not for its milk, not to catch its milk. What's the difference? He really agrees with the Tana Kama that that's considered a shmira and a malbush, and midoraita there's no issue. But midrabanan, he has a problem when you're doing it to catch the milk because they didn't make it tight, otherwise it would shrivel up the udder. So what they did is they just tied something around it. So if it's loose, it might fall off. And if it might fall off, maybe you're going to carry it in Rishut Rabim for Amot. Because they didn't tie it well enough, they didn't fasten it tight enough. Okay. That is our Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to start. Amar Shmuel. V'hu shekshura lo me'erev Shabbat. The Mishnah said that the only time you can let the chamor go out on Shabbat with this smicha, with this madat, with this covering, is only when it is tied. Remember the Mishnah said that? So Shmuel says, wow, we're behind over here. Times that I really got to go. 5 minutes. I have to come back to give another share today, I think. B'ezrat Hashem. V'hu she'ekshur lo me'erev Shabbat. This is only when it's tied erev Shabbat. Okay? Why? Because if you didn't tie it on erev Shabbat, if you tie it on erev Shabbat and you're showing this is the malbush, this is the clothing for my donkey, and that's normal. But if you only tied it today, you're not really showing that it's a need for the animal. And therefore, we view it more like a masri, something extra on the animal that it's carrying. So, in order to really create a real clothing for it and becomes part of the animal, you have to show that before Shabbat. That's what Shmuel says. Omer Rav Nachman, matniti nami deka, dekatani ena chamor yotze b'madat v'zman she'ena kshur lo. Our Mishnah, later on, is very meduyak, very telling, and shows what Shmuel said, because it said the chamor can't walk out with this covering, with this blanket, when it's not tied to it. Now, does it really mean that it's not tied at all? Is that what the Mishnah means? That if it wasn't tied at all, you can't go out? Hechidami. Obviously, it doesn't mean if it's not tied. You wouldn't have to say that in the Mishnah. Of course, you can't go out with things because you might pick it up and carry it. Of course, it's talking about it's tied, but he means you can't go out if it wasn't tied before Shabbat. That's what it means, which is Shmuel's halach of this Mishnah. Which infers that the Reisha, our Mishnah, which is the first Mishnah, when it says you can go out when it's tied, it means from Erev Shabbat. The next Mishnah, which says when it's not tied, means it wasn't tied from Erev Shabbat. You can't go out. Shema Mina. Tanya Nami Hachi. And we also learned in a Braita, Chamor Yotzei B'Madat B'Zman Shekshur Lo Me'erev Shabbat. V'lo B'Ukaf Af Al Pi Shekshur Lo Me'erev Shabbat. The Chamor can go out with the blanket when it's tied Erev Shabbat. The Braita says it explicitly. V'lo B'Ukaf Af Al Pi Shekshur Lo Me'erev Shabbat, but not with the Ukaf, even though it was tied from Erev Shabbat. Ukaf is the saddle. Because a normal ukaf is made for the usages of melacha. Okay? Normally, it wasn't placed on it to warm up the animal, therefore it's not called a malbush, but rather a carrying, a masui. Ukaf is also helps the heat, to heat up the animal. Therefore, it's considered a malbush according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Okay? Everybody really agrees with this, but the Recharenim say that since the ukif is much smaller, so we can't really consider it a malbush. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, yes, it is. As long as you don't tie to it a rope that goes around the whole chest of the animal, okay? Or as long as you don't put it under its tail to tie up the ukif. Why? Because then it looks like you're really getting it prepared to carry a load. When you saddle the saddle in such a tight way with ropes, it looks like you're ready to. Okay, but anyways, what do we see in this Braita? We see in this Braita it's only okay if you do it from Erev Shabbat, like Shmuel taught us. And Bezrat Hashem, today, we're going to have another shiur on this daf. I'm not sure exactly what time, but maybe something like I'm not sure. Time. Later on this afternoon. We have to figure it out. And we'll catch up Bezrat Hashem.